To all of our parents out there who just sent your kids back to school, congrats on making it over a year and a half. And our thoughts are with you as you try to keep the kiddos safe during this crazy time. Now, privatization is an age-old debate between the two political parties, one advocating for free and open markets and the other wanting government regulation to make for a fair playing field. Today, we're going to focus on our education system, a topic that really puts these theories and political ideologies to the test, and see why there is such a trend right now with the creation of charter schools and why more parents are turning private. This is private versus public schools. Private schools exist in the United States as corporate entities separate from public schools, which are supported by the government. Though they may differ widely in function, geographical location, size, organizational pattern, and means of control, these schools have two features in common. They're ordinarily under immediate control of private corporation, not a government agency. So before we talk about what this looks like today, let's give you a brief history lesson. Private schools date back to the schools opened by Catholic missionaries in Florida and Louisiana in the 16th century, which predated the beginning of formal education in Massachusetts. Basically, education was like the Wild West with little to no regulation, and pioneers of education were doing what they could to keep the populace educated, whether that was through wealthy donations, local government funding, or religious charities and missionaries. The combination of industrialization, urbanization, and immigration, mainly for the Irish into the Northeast, complemented by the civil disarray in Europe, led Horace Mann, Henry Bernard, and others to push for a common school that would forge an American identity. In the latter years of the 19th century, government regulations increased. This caused doubts in the private school system, especially since there were a lot of negative feelings towards immigrants. I guess nothing's changed. But at the time, it fell heavily on the Irish Catholic population. There was a lot of fear that private Catholic institutions' only function was to provide citizenship to immigrants. Laws were passed in Wisconsin and Illinois that attempted to control or perhaps eliminate private schools. In 1889, for instance, Wisconsin passed the Bennett Law, which defined a school as a place where the subjects were taught in the English language and which required students to attend a school in the public school district within which they resided. Then comes World War I. The nation looked to its schools to instill loyalty and civic virtue in its youth. The decade following the war witnessed a startling rise in membership in the Ku Klux Klan, a Red Scare, and anti-Catholicism in the presidential campaign of 1928. Private schools, especially those connected with anything foreign, in particular German, were under suspicion of being disloyal. This was followed by a few cases in the 1920s that went all the way to the Supreme Court regarding parental rights in the school system. Private schools experienced phenomenal growth in the years during and following World War II, increasing by 118% compared with 36% in the public sector. Private schools saved state and local governments roughly $31 billion during that decade. I don't feel like that's calculating inflation, but that's a lot of money. So why were people flocking towards private schools? A study done in the 1950s produced results indicating that students in Catholic high schools and possibly other private secondary schools academically outperformed those in public schools. Now, if we fast forward to the present day, the results still remain the same, but also these private institutions are more integrated racially than their public counterparts. So that may surprise you to hear, but remember, we're not saying private schools have more minority children than public schools. However, if you remember what we've said in the past about redlining and districts still being extremely segregated, it makes sense that public schools in general might have more overall segregation than that of private schools. I mean, there's the reality of the cost of education being a natural segregator, but in the instance of geographical location, it's eliminated. Private schools do alleviate the idea of having to stick to your own district, which does give freedom to a lot of families to choose for themselves, and for families that can afford, there is a voucher program. Let's talk about vouchers. Vouchers allow families to spend taxpayer dollars at schools of their choice, including private schools. They allocate to families the money the district would have spent educating their child in the form of a voucher, which can be used to pay for private school tuition and fees. The appeal of this, of course, is that you have a say in where you go to get the best education for you. But arguments against the voucher program would be that it takes away from public schools having students leave and their enrollment shoots down. Also worth noting, not all private school groups are in favor of vouchers. Some are concerned that vouchers may make the private schools subject to excessive government regulation and control and thereby negate the unique quality of their private school. So look, there are a lot of good arguments in here for going private. It would eliminate a big branch of systemic racism if people were allowed to choose openly where they wanted to go to school despite their geographical confinement. It might also help with integrating critical race theory if the curriculum wasn't oversaw by a government institution. That one's probably a stretch, but you see where the potential is for it. But let's be real about one thing. Not everyone is going to receive a voucher to select any school they want, which means there's always going to be lower class schools, even with a full privatization system. Also, even with the privatization system, how do you regulate which students would get into each school versus not? We already see college scandal issues with enrollment and bribery. How would we ensure that this wouldn't happen on this level? It also begs the question of who's opening these private institutions and who is regulating the curriculum. I know on one hand, regulation on a curriculum gives us problems like watered down versions of our history, especially related to people of color. However, on the flip side, that can mean full propaganda education in favor of the company sponsoring the institution. These are tough questions to answer. But before we make a decision on what can be done, we need to make sure that these changes will benefit everyone. And I do mean everyone. There's no real right or wrong answer here in terms of preference for private or public institutions. Hell, most of our opinions are probably formed by the very logical experience we had in our regions. For some regions, public schools can be just as good, if not better, than their private counterparts in the city. For others, it's not even close. But let me leave you with this. In Public and Private High Schools, The Impact of Communities, the authors stated that the goals of education are determined by the social organization of schools, their communities, and the families that they serve. This means that either way, the community has to be strong and supportive for the students to truly succeed. So, what do you think? Is education the chicken or the egg? Do we need to work on infrastructure and community issues first so we have a solid community for our school district? Do you think the education is top priority? How would you fix our systematic problem, and what is your preference for public versus private?